I'm Andy Crouch. I'm an author, journalist, speaker, also a senior strategist for communication at the John Templeton Foundation. If there was one thing I wish I had 9 more minutes to talk about here, it was actually extending this beyond the parent-child family to people who may not have a spouse, who may not have children, or for that matter, whose children may be no longer at home. There's only 20% of Americans live in a household with parents and children in the house. And so one thing I was very aware of in the second half of my talk is I'm talking about 1 out of 5 Americans and their current living situation. And so really the framework we have to use is this is about the household of God or the family of God. The early Christians lived in Greco-Roman society, which was built around households that were not just a couple with children. They were actually very complex connections, not just biological kin, but other kinds of kin and other kinds of relationship that were really like family. And they adopted that to talk about what it was like to be part of God's family, that we were now part of God's household. And that means that, I try not to use the word, I know why we use it, but I try not to use the word single, because none of us who are part of the story of God are single. We are connected to a family in which we all have brothers and sisters. We're all, in a sense, aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews. And we all have a part to play in one another's lives that goes as deep as biological family goes. So when you think about how do we extend these topics of technology to people who don't currently have a spouse or don't currently have children, I think the key principles actually stay the same. So how I arrange the space that I live in, how I structure my time so that I'm not always on, and how I build my whole life to form wisdom and courage and character in me. These are actually issues that we all have. 5 out of 5 people have those issues, not just 1 out of 5. And I think the key thing we need actually is to become deeply enough connected to each other that we really are part of a household together. Before I was married, I lived in the years between college and marriage, always with other people, actually in intentional communities where for most of the time we had the same bank account, a single bank account for all of us. I mean, we were technically single, if you want to put it that way, but we were actually deeply connected as brothers and sisters in Christ in these communities that were very rich, very intimate, very powerful, and very formative. And that's the ideal. Not everyone gets to live in those settings all the time, and I haven't my whole life either. But I think we need to be thinking about how do we build much richer forms of household life that include people who are at all stages of life and with and without marriage and with and without children. Technology is in every single household, and it affects not just family households, not just mother, father, children households. And if there's one thing I wish I had talked about more, had more time to talk about in my talk, it would be extending this topic to all the different kinds of households that we have and how to make sure technology is healthy in all those places. I said in my talk, we've got more leisure than we've ever had, and we have less Sabbath than we've ever had. We live in this because we live in a technologized world that really is, in a sense, run by machines. Machines never need to sleep. And in fact, they're more efficient when they don't sleep. And this really began with industrial production, when we moved most work out of the home to factories, where you had this massive capital investment, and you needed to get the most return on the investment. You need to run them 24/7. And you can run a machine 24/7 as long as you maintain it with no damage. You cannot run a person, or for that matter, a creature, an animal, 24/7. We need a rhythm of work and rest. And this is where Sabbath, I think, is just the most neglected and needed Christian practice, biblical practice. A question that always comes up is, well, what am I not supposed to do on the Sabbath? And this can verge on legalism. We can start to have these very prescriptive rules about what you're allowed to do and not do. And we know that Jesus paid no attention to those rules in his day. But Jesus did not invalidate the underlying principle of Sabbath. And I think the principle we have to pay attention to is, whatever in my life gives me a sense of provision for myself and my needs, or validation of myself and my significance from others. That's my work. And whatever in my life provides for me or validates me, I need at least 1 day a week, and I would also say 1 year in 7 if you want to be biblical, a whole year the biblical people were asked to take a whole year off every 7 where I do not do that thing. And this is different for different ones of us in terms of where we find our meaning and significance and our provision. But we all have to ask, what's the thing that when I do it, I'm providing for myself and other people are telling me I matter? Because really the fundamental truth is I don't provide for myself. God provides for me. And I don't have to prove to other people I matter. God validates me as his beloved son. And I need at least one day a week where I just totally rest in that. I met someone in the hallway who came up to me and he said, I feel like you are me in 20 years. He said, I want to be you in 20 years. And I said, aim higher. Like, don't settle for that. And yet I understand. I think when we're in that formative stage of our 20s, we're looking for models of who we could become. And I'm honored that he felt like I could be a model in some way. I also would say I really would hope that he would aim in a different direction. I can only be myself. And all I have to offer the world is myself. And to the extent I try to model myself on someone else, I'm actually diverting from the gift that God has to give the world through me. This was a huge issue for me when I first started a lot of public speaking, which was roughly in my 30s. And I felt very bad at it, very awkward at it. I'd been formed very much by the kind of academic modes of speaking, which I don't think are actually that effective at communication. I kind of knew it, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And I found myself imitating these popular speakers who were sort of my cohort of people who were really like killing it on stage. It made me so inauthentic. It was so forced. I didn't do it well. And about 10 years into that, I had this real reset where I decided the only thing I can be is myself on stage. I cannot be some pale imitation of that really funny person or that really likable, relatable person. I have got to be myself, including the fact that I'm a little geeky. I sometimes use words that are probably bigger than they need to be, and I kind of take delight in them. I have to just show up as the whole person I am and nothing but what I am. And I've actually found as I relaxed and just was myself, I have become, I think, so much more able to connect, including with people who actually I meet and they're very different from me and yet they can connect with me. And it's actually only when we are ourselves that other people can connect with us, because otherwise they're connecting with this kind of mask that you're putting on. And we need early on to just start removing those layers of artificiality and being as much as possible just the whole person with all the whole story that we bring has to come into everything we do.